Thank you.
Sure.
And we are recording.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, great. So very nice for this great introduction. Thank you so much. That was very nice. I'm going to just share a few slides here too while we chat. And again, I'm totally happy keeping it informal, and my slides are short, and I'll go through them real quick, and then we can jump into Q&A. Nice to see a lot of familiar faces here. So thank you, HTDC and UHOIC, for putting this together and having me here. This is a presentation that I have given to a government funding agency actually recently that has been funded us. So I can jump right in and start telling you about what we do. We are a Nalu Scientific, fast-growing startup here in Honolulu, Hawaii. We're at the Manoa Innovation Center. We have, so far, we've raised about $11 million in committed funding from a variety of SBIR and non-SBIR sources. That has allowed us to grow our headcount to about 18 staff members. We have access to advanced design tools for developing integrated circuits, essentially microchips. And we do rapid prototyping and testing in our labs here at right in Manoa also. Our scientific expertise are, particle physics detection and tracking, radiation detection, and microelectronics for particle physics detectors and astroparticle physics detectors, essentially. And our technical expertise are mostly IC designers, electronics and electrical engineers with firmware and software background, with the ability to execute on these tasks. And the word Nalu means wave in native Hawaiian language, and the reason for that is we digitize waveforms. So my next slide here is about what we do. Essentially, everything that happens in the world is analog. And in order for us to be able to perform any computing or calculation on that data, analog data, it has to be converted to digital form. And so we make microchips that perform this. They convert information from analog to digital. And the main goal is to be able to calculate the time of arrival of these very fast events down to a trillionth of a second, a picosecond, essentially. So we make these microchips. We've designed and developed several versions of these. This is how a microchip looks like from the outside. And then if you pop the hood, essentially internally, there are millions of transistors and a little silicon die. And if you open your computer or cell phone, you see lots of these, and it is somewhat commoditized, actually. But what we do is we make a very low power, low size, weight, and power version of these microchips, really specific to the needs of the scientific community in the astroparticle physics, essentially, environment. Now that we have created several versions of these microchips, we've moved into integration. Now, these microchips do not do much on their own. They need to be connected to a certain sensor or a sensor array. So we have started integrating these microchips with a variety of sensor arrays, and to try to kind of cater to the end users a finished solution, essentially, and put it in a box. So now we are vertically integrating ourselves. And then the next third point here is that the main application here is the collider experiment. So if you ever heard of the Large Hadron Collider, for example, it's buried in a 30-kilometer tunnel in Switzerland, and that allows scientists create the likes of the Big Bang moment, and then put their theories into test, essentially, to figure out how this world began, where we all came from. And these machines are size of a 6-story tall building or more, filled with microchips and microelectronics. So it's any electrical engineer's dream, essentially, to make one of these, one of the most complicated machines built by mankind. And we're working with a similar machine in Japan. And so when I was a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Hawaii, I was involved in that research project, and I realized that there's a need for this. Anyways, I'll get there. But there are a few of these machines, and these experiments come far in between. So we're also working to pitch our microchips for a variety of other applications, including medical imaging and LiDAR and other types of diagnostics, kind of very specialty, but high value type equipment, essentially. So in one slide, this kind of covers where we are and what we do. A little bit about the background. This has started with me traveling to this beautiful place in the suburb of Tokyo, essentially, that has a varied collider experiment underground, a 3-kilometer tunnel underground, and that's where the scientists are putting these theories into test. And it's a 900-member collaboration. There are 900 PhDs essentially working on this very complicated machine. So it was really fascinating to see that happen. 26 plus country. This is how the machine looked like in 2018. This is how it looks like in 2015 and in 2018. Now, I took these pictures myself, and going there and working with the scientists on these experiments kind of allowed me to think about the needs of this field. And again, this might look a little technical, but there are some sensors. This is what it boils down to. There are sensors that the technology is mature now. There are data processing technologies that are mature now. You can just go and buy. What's missing is in between here that allows you to read the sensors, convert it to digital. And so that was lesson one that I learned through that process. And then lesson two is that the red box here that's missing and is custom and it's very high value, needs to be high performance, needs to be radiation hard, needs to be, has a few other technical specifications that nobody else could make, essentially. So our solution was that we needed a new microchip for it. And
I want to jump in there, Isar, just for a second to kind of slow down just a little bit on where were you, as a company at this point? Were you done with your, because I'm kind of looking at the audience and maybe imagining that there's aspiring entrepreneurs out there who are doing their research, and where are you in the process when you're describing taking a look at this opportunity? Were you already a grad student, or you already had formed your company?
It was a few years after my PhD. I had some work experience. I had been in and out of startups at that point, and then I had just finished a postdoctoral fellowship a couple of years at UH.
Yeah, so you already had a little bit of the taste of the startup bug, right? And I knew this, but I just wanted to make sure our audience knew this, is that Isar is not only a scholar, he's an entrepreneur and had some experience there, but then you started seeing these opportunities, right? And so how do you, and I think this is where you're going, but this is just kind of where I wanted to jump in, was how did you go then from identifying a need and identifying a problem and then turning that into a winning proposal?
Right. So and that's where I think we can kind of get into that in Q&A form. I don't have a dedicated slide for it, but I can just talk to you a lot about that. Yeah. But yeah, so basically the lesson one and lesson two here, I started putting 2 and 2 together and realizing that opportunity, essentially, it's not $1 billion opportunity. Maybe it's a multi-tens of millions of dollars or multi-$100 million opportunity. It's a pain point. People, essentially, researchers, universities, governments are willing to pay for somebody to fix this problem for them and buy the product, essentially, instead of funding R&D every time for this. So that was something that was not on the shelf, and they wanted to see it on the shelf. And then my lesson two was like, okay, well, here's an opportunity, not many commercial options available. And so how do we fund an effort so this becomes the first step. Okay, now there's non-significant amount of R&D required to get it to the level that now you can put it on the shelf. And so where do you get money for that? And that was me having been involved with these projects, knowing the funding agencies that pay for these, allowed me to get kind of introduced to the SBIR program within the Department of Energy. And then the light bulb going off in my head that's a possibility. And so what happened was, it was 2015, I believe, that it was a session like this. Somebody was giving a talk, and HTDC was sponsoring that. Now, back in the day, it was in person, if you remember. And so we were at the Manoa Innovation Center, and there was a representative from this company called Dawnbreaker. Jenny Server was there, and Some of the people that are on the call today were actually moderating the same conversation there. And so I started talking to them and I proposed this, and they said, yeah, you should go ahead and write a proposal and kind of take it from there. So, and followed up with them to make sure I had the content and the style and everything else in place, essentially. And so there are many mistakes that you can make, so you won't see money ever. I guess everybody tells you those. Anyway, so the fast forward, we now have grown a lot. That was 5 years ago, and that's when we were trying to figure out how to get money or funding to put this together. And now we've gotten a significant amount of funding thanks to a variety of efforts that are going on, and that has allowed us to also increase our headcount. We have PhD level and master's level people that are working with us at the company, working for us at the company, full-time employees that are now driving a lot of the innovation there too. So the funding also has resulted in significant amount of sponsored research at University of Hawaii, and also several national labs in East Coast and West Coast. And in fact, that has allowed us to also create our own workforce here in Hawaii. How do you find integrated circuit designers on an island? Essentially, that's a very tough question. I get that question a lot, and so us working with the University of Hawaii has allowed us to fund master's and PhD level students at UH that have ended up, some of them getting their first jobs at Nalu Scientific, essentially. Moving forward for us, we'll be continuing to develop our tech. We will continue to seek more funding to perfect the recipe. These are very challenging and really labor intensive and developments to develop a microchip, and then also integrating with sensors. So we'll continue on this path. At the same time, we're also working on distributor agreements with collaborators and other companies that are willing to sell our products, essentially. So that will allow us to focus on what we're good at, which is innovating here in Hawaii, and let them do the hard work of going to door to door and sell. And we'll see what comes out of that. So that's the next effort, and that's what we're making a push for. So people ask me a lot, why Hawaii, and I'll jump into that later too, but it'll probably be part of the Q&A. But it's been a strategic location for us between Asia and mainland US. There's the University of Hawaii here that is R1 research university. And for those that are not familiar, there are two ranks, I think, of universities that I've heard of. There's the R1 and R2s. That R2s are usually mostly teaching schools and do not have much significant funding in terms of research and development, whereas UH, now Rafael can probably jump in there, but hundreds of millions of dollars a year, maybe $500 million a year of research comes here, right, Rafael? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, about 450 million. Yes, correct.
Yeah, so that's an insane amount of money actually that coming to a university to perform research in a variety of fields, and this, what we are in is like a very, very small pie of that. So now imagine the possibilities there if any research program could have some sort of an offshoot kind of startup environment coming out of it. That just tells us, that the sky's the limit essentially here. Then the other aspect is that we feel that we're making an impact on this state. If we were in California, if we were in the Bay Area, we would be another electrical engineering company making microchips, and there would be a building filled with the likes of us. Whereas here we are touching people's lives right here in Hawaii, and we're also getting the attention and love too that helps small companies. Every time that we get a news release or something like that, people around the world will see, essentially. So that's very nice. The Hawaii brand has been very helpful for us. People may forget our names, may forget the name of our company, the type of microchip we make, how fast it runs or the speed of it. But one thing they will never ever forget is that we are from Hawaii, and we're doing this in Hawaii. That it'll just get etched into people's minds, whoever they are, either being government program managers or customers or collaborators or researchers, essentially around the world. And also we're helping to retain local expertise here, people that have graduated from University of Hawaii, or people that have family here, and now they're looking for being able to stay here and contribute, to being close to their family and contribute locally, so they have an option. Instead of moving to mainland being their first or their only option, now they have an option to stay here. So that helps us feel it's fulfilling to see that for us.
Hi, Isar. We did have a question that something on your slide here, and we will also get to Seth's question in a little bit. But this question was more about the number of phase ones. So the question is that you're saying 9 phase 1 awards have been received and 6 phase 2 respectively. If so, how do you go through multiple iterations of a phase?
Right. So I don't quite understand that, the multiple iterations.
Let me jump in, because I think just to clarify, I think we assume everybody on the call is a little familiar with the SBIR process. Phase 1 is the first step, and it's usually awards up to 150,000. If you're successful, you're invited to apply for phase 2, and phase 2 is the next step of the phase 1 award research that you started, and then there's a phase 3. When you're talking about 9 phase 1 awards, I think the question may be, are those 9 different topics and different applications that you've applied for? And are they all related to your microchip?
Right. No, that's a good question. Everything is very synergistic to what we do. We did not go 9 different directions. That would be impossible for a small company like us. So we applied for our first microchip, which was a little slow maybe, but it would do the job. And then after delivering on that, then we now have a relationship with the program, with the agency, and now they come to us and tell us that, hey, we could be interested in something a little faster, and so here's an opportunity for us. So we built up on that, and now something faster, something cheaper, something better, something that would still employ the workforce. It is not the same work. The results are different. So you cannot send the same proposal and keep asking for funding for it. It's not good practice, and also maybe not the right way to deal with these funding agencies. So you want to differentiate as much as possible, but not to the effect that creates 9 different directions for you. So everything is very synergistic in terms of what we have done here. And then it says 6 phase 2 SBIRs. Most of these have actually already transitioned into phase 2. It was just that we had more phase 1s by then, and it's just a matter of time for phase 1s to turn into phase 2s.
I guess,
okay.
If you don't mind, if I can ask a question, and I think sometimes writing for a new company, applying for an SBIR is intimidating. I mean, we've heard stats that at times 1 of 4, 1 of 3. I mean, there's different numbers, but usually people tell you if you apply and the first time you apply, you don't get it, don't be discouraged. It's just part of the process, and then get better and go again. So I guess my question is, how successful have you been, and what has the process been like?
Well, yeah, so the national average, I think it might have been discussed in this workshop, is about 15 to 16, 20% maybe for a phase 1, depending on the year and the number of applicants and how much funding they have, and about 40 to 50% for a phase 2. So I think we might be a little higher than that sometimes, and sometimes not there. So I think we average out the same, I think. It's just, in reality, the more you have an interface with the agency, the better chance of getting funded there is for you, essentially. And so that's just the reality, because first they will trust you more, and also you might be speaking their language better. And so your proposal might be understood by the reviewers better, and the interface might be better. So we do have a lot of proposals that we wrote and we thought would get funded and did not get funded. So I'm not ashamed to say that, yeah. But you got to try, and so you won't know until you try. And then somebody asked, what the number of miscellaneous contracts there are. It's about 10% or 10 to 15%, but it's growing really fast. So based on these SBIRs that are government funded R&D, we now are either getting sales going or getting service contracts going, because we have experts on hand that we can contract out their labor essentially. So, and that counts as non-SBIR funding essentially.
Thank you so much. And, I take it back to where you started, with this presentation today was you had mentioned that you had been, instead of the featured speaker, you had been a participant in one of these sessions and being able to hear from others. So I think it's an important takeaway that if you apply and you don't win, that's not the end of the world. That's part of, this part of life. That's part of the process. But that doesn't mean that you don't have a good idea or you don't have amazing technology. And so I did also want to comment that it's the first time in a long time that I've seen the Nalu presentation, and I'm blown away. And it speaks to the type of talent that we do have here in Hawaii. We have amazing technology. We have amazing technologists. And sometimes, being able to share some of our experiences, it'll lead to future success. So thank you so much for spending some time doing, Isar, helping these new companies get started. If you don't mind, can I jump in with the question here, or you want to finish going through your presentation?
Well, your questions is probably a better thought process to follow, anyways, because you are seeing things that I do not see. So please, bring it up.
I'll ask a question because the topics. I think the questions coming in are very relevant to you, but it's all about getting started. And I think you're talking about the first SBIR leading to the next SBIR and your strategies on how to use multiple SBIRs to develop a core technology. But when you got started, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced? And I think some very basic and simple questions. Did you work with a grant writer?
Right. It's always that chicken or egg problem. It's unfortunate, the situation. So you want to say that you're able to, you see the opportunity, you see that, okay, you could be the right person to be able to execute on this, or you even have the right team for it, but you just do not have a track record yet. So how do you convince a government program manager and the reviewer to take a leap of faith, essentially? So and that's always a challenge, and that's one of the risks, but it's something that can be overcome. And these reviewers and program managers are used to seeing new companies. That's their job. Their job is to also take a risk on a new company that may have a new technology in mind. And so that's essentially what we relied on. And we put together a phase 1 proposal that we got help from HTDC. At our time, the DOE has a phase 0 program that I encourage everybody to look at, and we worked a lot with DOE, so that has become our home institution essentially. So that phase 0 program, there were reviewers that would read our proposal and also read our budget justification, read our commercialization plan. There is a 4-page, 2 or 3-page commercialization plan that also needed for a phase 1 SBIR for DOE. And each agency has its own set of documents. So it's almost impossible for an entrepreneur or either a business person or a scientific or technical person to be on top of all of these, and things will fall in cracks and mistakes will be made. So we were fortunate to be able to work with HTDC and the phase 0 program. And we did not employ a grant writer. I had some background, so I managed to do that myself. But we had second eyes look at everything essentially. Yeah.
Thank you. I think there was a related question. When you applied, were you just basically submitting your resumes? And I think that how many did you apply for at the same time? And was it basically with the same team?
Yes, generally speaking, it's been the same team since we've been growing. We have a good number of senior engineers and scientists on our team now that we can put their resumes. So I think each agency has its own directions in terms of what type of resume, how many pages, what level of detail they require. So I would say read their FOA very carefully and kind of try to follow that path essentially. But yeah, you need to submit names of the key personnel, their resume, their background, something about them. Now that level of detail might be different agency by agency.
Okay, there's more questions coming, but we'll probably save them for the end. And I think that was a good pause, while we were talking about getting started and some of the key things to getting started. But I'll turn it back to you to walk through the progress, of your company, because I think it's a great story. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. So I got these questions a lot, so I thought I'd just create a bullet point here, set of bullet points and things that I thought has helped us, and that might be something that could help others. And again, every company, every technology, every vertical is different, but I think in general, I myself was not a business person. I've been a technical person by education, but then I had to now run a business, start a business, run a business. So I started learning a lot of that. And a lot of engineers and scientists have that background. They're generally speaking, they're curious, and we read the internet and the best practices and everything else. So it's all possible. But also it's possible to team up with a person that could have their business focus. So if you're a professor at the university and you have a tenure job, or tenure track job, there's already a lot of responsibilities on your plate and teaching classes, doing research, and bringing funding and everything else. So it might be, maybe having a full-time kind of business person on the side that can team up with you might be a way to go. I, on the other hand, did not have that kind of job. And so this Nalu Scientific became my full-time job. So I put everything all the time, the midnight hour oil, whatever you call it, burning all that essentially. So I think that has allowed us to just really be all in essentially for that. And then now we're getting the results here. So also relationship with the university was very critical for us at the beginning, because it was a one-man company. And then we put the name of a professor at the university that we were working with, and to this date we work with on the application, and then here's as a subcontractor essentially, and that they're a subcontractor for this project, and they will be providing technical advice, and they will be leading a team at the university essentially, and that gave a lot of gravity to our grant application. So do not discount that, I would say. And nobody knew us or the name of our company, but everybody knew the name of that professor, for example. And then applications get rejected all the time. We have plenty of rejected applications, and so a lot of these agencies are now being forced to provide feedback by either by legislative process or by other processes. They need to provide feedback. So read the feedback, read the reviewer's feedback, and that's essentially free feedback for you. And try to revise and resend if the topic exists in the next round of funding. And then the normally R&D process, especially in hard science and hard tech, hardware development is very expensive. So always try to find innovative ways to ask for more funding, and that could be keeping the relationship with the program managers. That could be through and through the performance of your project. Normally you end up talking to more stakeholders in that field and learning more about the needs there. And so that's one way to get more R&D funding or complementary other type funding. We also managed to tap into HTDC's matching funds program that's funded by the state of Hawaii, which is they can tell you more. It's that what blew me away was that's the longest running program in the country. Essentially, they started in the 80s and still going on, and it has expanded significantly, and that allowed us to cover a lot of gaps things that the funding agency will not pay for, or you applied for funding a year ago, now your needs are different, and now where do you cover funding there? And so the matching grant helped us a lot. So ask for help.
Expand on that a little bit. I know this is a little self-serving, but if you don't mind expanding a little bit on what SBIR can or cannot pay for and where the matching grant is critical, because I think that's an important point maybe for the audience to understand as well.
Right, sure. So generally speaking, again, I'm not an expert in accounting or legal or anything like that. Just as a business person here, there are things that federal funds are allowed to be used for, or it's allowable costs. These are cost reimbursable, essentially, grants, right? So you're allowed to reimburse yourself or your company essentially for certain types of costs. And there are things that are unallowable. And if you wrote a proposal a year ago and you did not have a line item for a certain type of equipment, for example, and now in the performance of your project, you realize you need this $10,000 box, it is now an unallowable kind of line item. You cannot just go out and buy it and then expect reimbursement from the government or your grant sponsor, essentially. So that's where a source of funding from the state, for example, that has a different definition for allowable and non-allowable will come in handy. You can go and buy that soldering station that you really wanted, or that server that you really wanted, but the federal funding did not pay you for it, and that could be a critical thing. Or now you could also keep staff on the payroll a little longer until you can get the phase 2 funding. If you're in between on gap, essentially, or pay for rent if you're short 1 month. And so these could mean life or death for any small business. Does that help?
Thank you. I should have led you maybe a little bit more. Some of the things that I've heard through the years from the companies, one of the most frequent things I've heard is travel. In getting from a phase 1 to phase 2, there isn't necessarily within the federal program, there isn't necessarily budget that you can afford to go and travel, because you have a lot of work to do within that limited budget that you do have. But your chance of being successful for phase 2 does hinge on, some of it is relationship with the people who are evaluating. And I know a lot of companies have stressed the importance of that, as well as protecting their intellectual property, and also with bridge funding. So I think those are some of the things you talked about.
Absolutely. No, these are great points. Getting patents, securing patents, for example. Some agencies have rules, and your funding might not cover all of that, or even any of that. And so that's another place that you can use the matching funds, essentially, to be able to secure a patent, which will allow you to bring an investment later. So yeah.
There was another highlight. There was another point that you said. You said it quickly, but I think it was an important point. So I just kind of wanted to bring it out a little bit. And it's the importance of partnership, and the importance of teams, and how you can fill gaps, potential gaps in your team through partnerships. Or I think the case that you mentioned was specifically using a university professor who had the brand name recognition that you needed to carry your proposal forward. So just again, maybe if you can expand a little bit on how you partnered. Have you worked with any of the federal labs? Have you worked, and besides contracting the university, what does that look like? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So we have done all of that, actually, and especially in the recent years. So at first, when we started, it was our contacts in the University of Hawaii, and then we started expanding. We started traveling, and that was 2016, 17, and 18. And so then we realized, okay, this University XYZ on the mainland also has this other capability, or they have some recognition in the field, so let's team up with them. And so we have done that too. We've also now we regularly work with, I think, 5 or 6 of the national labs now, and either subcontracting to them or getting contracts from them, which is, we started by subcontracting some work to them because they had certain facilities that we needed to do some processing on some of our microchips or on our instruments, and And then through that process, they learned about our capabilities and they started giving us work. So, and that's been just a good relationship that's been going on. So it's a matter of kind of, for us, it's been something that we just allow it to naturally grow. And we weren't selling a product, or we didn't have to go out and make phone calls and cold call people. A lot of it happened through going to conferences and spending the time and money to showcase our technology, and also just being at a reception with a scientist at another lab that was working on similar projects and problems, and we started connecting and kind of developing relationships there, and them knowing about us being a real company, real people working on it with real technology, and that could solve their problem. So a lot of it happened really naturally, and so yeah, so that's where going out there presenting results, and a lot of these government grants actually have this aspect of being able to publish your work in there, and so as soon as you have some sort of a disclosure or some sort of protection in place for your technology, then I highly encourage you to go out to conferences and even renting a booth there and putting a demo of your product out there. And that's what we use some of the HTDC matching funds that federal funding would not allow you to go and demonstrate or have a booth at a conference, for example, but HTDC funds would. And so, or we would go with HTDC to conferences in Washington, DC, or like the SBIR Roadshow or other places, and demonstrate that technology. And that had allowed some visibility, that had allowed us to kind of create those relationships. And so, yes, the short answer is we've worked with several universities and national labs, and we continue to do that. There are challenges, it's very complicated, and I can get into detail there too, but you have to do it anyways to grow.
Awesome. Erin, how are we doing on time? We okay?
So we have about 15 minutes left. There were a couple more technical questions, kind of saving them for later or after the presentations and your questions.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So Isar, do you want to keep going on your slides, or are you ready for some more questions from me?
Yeah, I think I can park this here, and you can take the lead here. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So before we get to all the technical questions, I had one question that I had planned and just wanted to ask you in advance, because we are Hawaii. Everybody here is representing Hawaii. And you mentioned this a couple times during your presentation. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the pros and cons of Hawaii, being located in Hawaii, perceptions, things that we have to deal with, brand that we have to deal with, and at the same time, the strength of our brand and some of the assets that we have. Do you mind chatting about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think we all know about the pros of being in Hawaii. So in terms of lifestyle, and also the connections and the way that we all treat each other, here. We are just so close to each other, and everybody lives on an island. You can't do harm to anyone. You have to be nice to everyone, and expect the same, that everybody be nice and with you, and also it's just such a small place. You run into people in grocery stores all the time, right? So that is essentially allows us to be in an environment that we are all very honest and truthful with each other, and also want the best for each other, because we want best for ourselves too. And that actually is a very valuable commodity, in my opinion, these days, everywhere in the world. And so when we travel, when we go places, and we're not just ourselves, our engineers, and we're presented with a technical challenge, we tell them the truth about it, and we tell them all the aspects of it, and we tell them everything that we know about it, without trying to say we can solve this problem or not, or without trying to sell them on anything, basically. And that genuine kind of disclaimer that comes with probably because all of our staff members have some Hawaii roots or background or life here, and so that I think comes across very genuine to a lot of our customers and also our collaborators. they really appreciate that. We're not here just to push a business agenda. We're here to make a relationship and also do something that will be beneficial for them and for us and the scientific community that we're in. So I think that is something that's just a huge valuable asset, and that's something that we're kind of brought up in or raised in, and living in here for a while. Even if you're not born and raised here, just living on the island for like 10, 20 years, you'll kind of get that. And so that, I think that's an asset. The problems are, I think, in the world, mainland US, other places, people are not aware that Hawaii has such great potential. And so we are now ambassadors. And once we bridge that gap, once we tell them that, yeah, we're not just always on the beach and or surfing, which is also a great thing to do anyways, but we have real jobs, and Hawaii is a real place that is not just what you see in the movies, and pictures, and it also has problems. And so it's not a utopia either. And so cost of living is high. The tech industry could do a lot better here, for example. And so we are taking a step in solving that problem. That's our message to them. And so people will identify with us. And believe it or not, we have the same problems here that my fellow entrepreneurs in small town Arkansas have. Different kinds of problems, but a lot of it is very similar. So we can connect really well on a lot of these, and a lot of these collaborators that we work with, they all come from all over the world, and they all have their own similar problems. So and all of us want progress. So it was kind of a high level answer, but I think the reality is you can make it work anywhere, and there's no ideal place to be, especially in this day and age. That's what COVID has taught all of us.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm asking the same question, but I'll just drill specifically. How do you deal with distance, or the perception of distance, when people say it's such a long way away? Does that come up, or does that not come up anymore?
It used to come up a lot more, and but then since COVID, that's just this new status now, new standard. And so that question has not been asked for a year and a half now, which is nice. But even before that, we're in tech. So tech people are good at figuring these things out, figuring these barriers out. Even before COVID, we would send one of our instruments to a lab in East Coast, and then connect remotely, like logging in remotely and fixing things for them using screen share and webcam, and they would be blown away that this is possible. And yeah, they might have been used to having a tech fly all over there, but we showed them that, yeah, you really need that, and this is actually faster and more efficient. So a lot of times, just because we're in an environment that people are tech savvy, I think we ended up getting a lot of benefit out of that.
I want to put a footnote on Isar's comment. Having had the privilege of working around him, he is always traveling, and so I just want everybody to understand as well. Distance is not a problem necessarily for Isar, and he's been able to very successfully use technology and use video conference when he can. But he is not afraid to travel, and some of this is the hard work that is required from these companies, just to, again, not to mislead people as to you can just be smart and talented and be successful. There's a lot of hard work that I have watched Isar put in over the years, whether flying back from Japan and going straight to the East Coast and stopping by to say hello in between. I've seen it, firsthand. So that's why I was giggling a little asking that question, because I know that the distance may be tiring, but it's not a problem for Nalu, because Isar is there. I mean, if you want him there, he's there. I do want to save some time for questions, and I do have one more question for you. But Erin, can we go to a few of the questions now? Thank you.
Sure. Let me just scroll back up. This one came in early on from Seth. So could this be used in a more commercial product like BL53L1X? I'm sure you probably know what that is. Or is it only for advanced research?
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with that. So
Okay.
let me put my email address here, and I'll be happy to answer that in email privately.
Thank you, Isar. And then another one that came in is, let's see, what medical imaging does Nalu Scientific do?
So we are, we're doing kind of early development on those at the moment, and technically the same microchips can be used for the likes of positron emission tomography imaging, essentially. So we're now working with some collaborators for some developments in that area.
Great. Another question just came in. How do you identify the grants you can apply for? What if you have a technology but can't find a corresponding grant?
I think that is a very difficult question to answer. That is what this whole thing kind of boils down to. And so finding that match. The SBIR program is I think between $2 to $4 billion a year program, and they have thousands, if not tens of thousands of topics. And some agencies are very particular in terms of what they want, and some agencies are generally, they're looking to make the world a better place. And so there are 11 agencies that make these funding available. So it's a matter of finding the right agency that and that you can find that match for. And that's and it might not be this year, it might be next year, and also SBIR might not be the way to go for your technology. And so there are certain types of developments that just are not suitable for SBIR. If you need $100 million right off the bat just to try to test something, SBIR is not for you probably. But yeah, there are agencies that could be looking a little more broadly, like NSF, for example, has kind of broader goals compared to DOE or DOD. And so hopefully that can help kind of browse topics within those agencies in a way that can result in match.
I'd like to make a comment. I know the question's not addressed to me, but I worked with a lot of companies through the years and just had a general statement regarding trying to find an SBIR for your technology. It's almost it's a needle in a haystack. It's almost impossible to find a grant that's written for you unless you were involved early and they wrote the grant for you. So if you have a technology and you want to develop it, it's better if you have a core competency, like Nalu has experience and expertise in microchip, and then finding a grant application that you can take your core competency and compete and put in a competitive application using your core competency. And then you'll have to, bring in outside funds or midnight oil, if you will, to develop your own what you want to do. I don't know if that clarifies things, but it's really a lot of people, they want to build a widget and they're looking for a grant that's going to help them build a widget. Well, the grant won't help you build the widget, but it'll help you build the team of engineers who can build the widget. So it's a little bit different way of thinking about it. Were there other questions, Aaron? I know there was a question that came directly to me. It was, do you have to comply with niche requirements after winning an SBIR reporting in cybersecurity? And the answer is yes. And we have a whole series of informational sessions talking about SBIR requirements and what to do if you win. I don't know, Isar, you want to give maybe because it's a general question and there's a lot to cover, maybe you want to give a couple pointers that things
Right.
that you want people to take away.
Right. Now post-award, there are lots of administrative steps that need to be taken into account. And so compliance-wise, then there's the cybersecurity aspects. So some agencies are more strict, and like DoD has upgraded its requirements, whereas DOE or some of the granting agencies are a little more lenient at the moment. And so it really depends what agency you work with, but generally speaking, things like accounting, compliance, legal, reporting, across the board, they are there. And when you get the funding, it may look like money coming to your bank account, but it has a strict and a bunch of like T's and C's, terms and conditions associated with them. And so a lot of these agencies also have workshops on best practices and how to administer all of these. So that's definitely something that everybody should be aware of and careful for. So we started doing everything in-house, and then there are companies that help you to do these. And so you can find vendors that provide accounting services, or vendors that provide HR services, or vendors that provide legal services. And so it's a matter of finding the right fit and finding the right people, such that you propose the work and also execute the work the right way. And by the way, there's this University of Hawaii here that has expertise in bringing $500 million a year of R&D funding and administering that here locally. So I think there's a good opportunity to interface with UH and OIC and listen to their expertise, especially if you're a starting entrepreneur or academic, essentially.
Okay, well, I know there may be a few more questions, but we're running out of time here, and I want to make sure that we're respectful of your time. I do want to, similar to before, just point out Isar is an exception. I mean, he's an amazing person, fabulous to work with, very talented, very smart, very articulate. The hard work part, I don't. I really want to emphasize that Isar has taken advantage of every opportunity that I know that we have presented, and we're very happy to have him as part of the community and encourage those of you who are considering going down this path. I think he is open and available. He put his email there in chat. So go ahead and have a cup of coffee with him, or, granted, sorry, I don't want to flood your inbox, but just pointing out that he's been a great contributor to the community and a great resource for HTDC to be able to share with this, up and coming community. So thank you for your time. One last thing I just want to ask you is one takeaway from this call that you want to leave behind for perspective. Let's say very specifically for a prospective SBIR company, somebody who's new, thinking about going SBIR, thinking about starting a company, going in this route. One takeaway or one point that you can, the only one.
Okay, well, I have three. Can I go through all three really quickly?
You can go through as you can squeeze in 1 minute.
Right, so just do it. Just go out there and do it, number one. Number two is sometimes you don't know where you need help, and that's the important thing. So being present in these meetings and being connected with HTDC and UHOIC is critical, because there are things that you need help, and there are things that you don't know you need help. And so being connected with these, listening to the keywords, even if it's not today, it might be 2 years from now, that at least the keywords, you remember where to go back to for help. And the third one is, we have this world-class university here, UH, and they're open for business. They're willing to work, and it's very easy to work with University of Hawaii from our experience working with several national labs and universities. And so there's a lot happening there, and I think everybody should take advantage of this opportunity. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for having me. And the number one, just go out and do it. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks. With that, I'll turn it back to Wayne to close us out. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So again, special thanks to Isar. Thank you so much for spending an hour with us. And the insight that you bring to all of these is awesome. And I think again, as a seasoned veteran of SBIR, I think you bring a lot to the table. And like you said, you just got to go out and do it, right? Just got to do them, right? Just go out and if you don't succeed once, you just go try again until you get it right. So Isar, thank you so much for all your insight today. Thank you to Len for moderating. And again, also thank you to our partners. University of Hawaii Manoa, the Office of Innovation and Commercialization. Just wanted to close. This coming Friday, we have part 2 of the webinar. Again, it's Friday, July 16th from 12 to 1. Again, and it's part 2 of the lessons learned and best practice. We have Steve Brennan from Premier Solutions, and we have Dr. Paul Wise from Oceanet that will be sharing their experience with all of you. So if you haven't already registered, please go ahead and register. Either it's on, I think, on our social media page of the University of Hawaii, or you can just email us and we can get you forwarded to the registration link. So with that, just wanted to close. Just want to say thank you to everybody to spend your lunch hour with us this afternoon. And if any questions, please email us. So thank you very much again. Aloha, everybody, and stay safe.